basically got everything in education and training that the company, which is the leading firm in Germany, offered at the time. And I only found out about the nature of the monetary system back in 2007, which then took me on a journey that I researched for 1 year every night from 9 in the evening to 3 in the morning, the financial history. And what I found was most astounding, because I wasn't taught, and I thought I'd been going through a very intense training with my independent financial advisor certificate. So obviously then we moved into precious metals, because it seems that it is the only real protection, in my view, from what I researched after that year. So I come from a background that is a lot of like the regular independent financial advisory products that we sold more or less to our customers back at the time, to going into a deep research and then figuring out maybe there is something that we overlooked, or the entire industry doesn't know. And even my uncle at the time, who worked 45 years as a banker, he didn't know that the monetary system is based on a promise, and it's not backed by gold or silver as it was in the last time, the last century, say. It's a claim check that is based on the basically on the belief of the person who hands you goods and services for it, and that belief is held up by the government saying we're having this currency, and the currency is basically backed by our GDP. By the people. And now we're in a stage where the Western democracies are massively indebted, and so it's like the future generations are already counted into the equation, or because the money that the future kids, when they go to work, will create was printed today. So if we look to America, for example, then the Federal Reserve creates all the dollars in the world. And the Federal Reserve, which is mostly unknown to many people, is a private corporation. And it's a sort of hybrid institution that is owned by I think a dozen private families, but it is also part and controlled by Congress. So if you can print money, that's obviously the most wonderful business in the world. And then you charge interest on it. But as it is not backed by anything and it's created out of thin air, then all the dollars are basically they're owed to the Federal Reserve. So they're basically owed to these owning families. Well, the Congress elects the director of the Federal Reserve, which is Janet Yellen at the current time, and before that it was Ben Bernanke. So they sort of elect the head of the Federal Reserve, and who oversees the monetary policies and decides obviously on raising interest rates or not, or stimulating the economy or not. The Congress issues governmental bonds, and the Federal Reserve decides to buy those bonds. So basically, the Federal Reserve funds America. The Federal Reserve is owned by these 10 families, so they are behind the scenes, so to speak. The real money is a store of wealth. It is something that has intrinsic value. So in the olden days, let's say 5,000 years back, gold was used as money. And then at some point, silver came into being a monetary metal as well, and it was used in circulation. So real money, per definition, is a store of wealth. It is something that has an intrinsic value. And then we have currency. Currency is often confused with the term money, because if we look in our wallet and we have £100, $100, or €100 in it, we always say, oh yeah, I've got €100. I've got some money on me. But actually, it's just currency. Currency is a medium of exchange. It is something, it's a claim check that is circulated, and everyone knows that that claim check sort of is backed by something called money or something of intrinsic value. And that was actually invented in the 1900s by the English Central Bank, because they said, okay, why do we need to get this gold and silver around? First, they banned silver out of the UK, and then eventually they invented these claim checks, and they said, okay, that is then backed by gold. And then this process, this idea, was the founding idea of the Federal Reserve in 1913. So they said, okay, don't worry about that gold stuff. We keep it stored, and that little piece of green paper here, that is backed by X amount of grams in gold or silver, and it was actually printed on the dollars back then. And that was the modern monetary system, and that lasted until 1971, when they actually unbacked the dollar from gold. So and since then, we just have currency that is backed by nothing. Well, the City of London is one of the major financial hubs on the globe. So, speaking in terms of currency creation or money creation, then there is no real money in circulation anymore on this planet. So we all have paper currencies. The last currency that was moved away from being gold-backed was the Swiss franc in 1991. If I'm not entirely mistaken, it was either 1991 or 1998. So basically, the banks are trading these paper currencies, and it's the same as, it's just that we have different currencies with an exchange rate. I mean, we have these institutions called World Bank and International Monetary Fund that oversee, sort of like on a global scale, these developments and the trends that are emerging. And obviously, every central bank has their own monetary policies, but because we're in a global competition within these currencies now, everyone is sort of trying to debase their currency just a little bit more, because that is helping the exportation of goods, and it's helping people to go on holiday and have a cheap holiday. So there is like tons of different views and ideas that are discussed, but each of these central banks, they technically have their own policy, but they all try to stay ahead of the game a little bit. Well, I wouldn't call it market manipulation with that term necessarily. There is something that we call asset inflation. And asset inflation simply means that there is X amounts of dollars, euros, and pounds that are floating around, and these, let's say, billions in cash, they look for investment. So since 2008, when these central banks created these trillions of within their quantitative easing programs, that money went somewhere, right? So, and that money is floating inside the financial markets, because most of that money that was created didn't hit the road. It didn't feed homeless people in America, for example. We have a little bit of a different situation here in Europe, but generally speaking, that money is stayed inside the financial system to fix things up, and that money is looking for investment. So if we see the global stock markets moving more or less simultaneously up and down all in the same time, then that is linked to capital freely moving into those markets or moving out of those markets. QE just means money printing, or let's say currency creation, or to be 100% accurate. And that currency is floating, and that is looking for yield, and that is looking for return, because it was created at like, I don't know, like 0.5 or 0.2% interest. So it doesn't take a lot of return to make a buck out of it. Well, you have to be a very savvy investor, of course, and you have to know what you're doing. And I wouldn't recommend for like the private individual who doesn't have a professional background going into debt and then trying to generate some form of profit on the financial markets, because as we said before, that money floats in and out of different markets. And what we see since 2008 is that that these setbacks in these markets are so dramatic usually. So let's say gold goes up 2% and it goes down the next day 3%, and then it goes up 3% again, and then it goes down 2%. So that are huge movements, and we see the same movements in the bond market. I think the German bond market just had a gain that wasn't recorded in the last 25 years, and that was just within a few days. And people can go out of business, like these trading firms in London that went out of business when the Swiss National Bank unpacked the franc from the euro. Every time a central bank creates a trillion currency units, whatever we want to look at, pound, US dollars, euros, yen, yuan, whatever, whenever that happens, then there is more currency in the pool that was there before. So because there is more currency in the pool, every other unit of currency automatically gets devalued. And this is what we see when we look at wealth preservation tactics, because we see, hey, is there an end in this trend of creating more and more currency units, or is there any other idea what we can do in order to protect and to preserve our wealth? There is always a deeper look that we need to perform in order to get accurate information. In our Celtic Gold Bulletin, we always recommend to people to read the mainstream press and the alternative press. The alternative press is massively successful because it provides stories and data that is more neutral than, let's say, what comes out of the mainstream press. But so to balance these things out, we recommend to read the two completely different sources of information. Then the second is that there is recovery in parts, so that QE programs that the European central banks launch, which is basically the ECB and the National Bank in the UK, the central bank in the UK, sorry.
Bank of England.
Bank of England, yes, of course. I just missed that term, sorry. The Bank of England, so they did some share towards this recovery we're seeing, but in the same time there is a wealth transfer taking place. So if you look at Spain, the youth unemployment is, I think, 50% now, and there is a lot of Spanish people coming into Germany for jobs currently. So if you look at the overall European situation, one can say we have moderate growth, and we just missed recession. So all of these things, I don't see the economies going very rosy, and there is tremendous problems. Everyone knows about Greece currently. We have problems in Spain, Italy, Portugal, and I believe France.
That's
is
correct.
going to see massive problems next.
That's right.
So,
and France is the fifth largest economy on the planet, I do believe.
Yeah. So I think that people really have to balance the things out that they read in the mainstream press. And there is one more aspect. I always use the example of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index is the official publicly announced figure, but that figure is created out of a basket of different goods. And there is inside that basket, there is different percentages on how these goods weigh into the overall result of the CPI, right? And that basket is changed to the more or less goodwill of the people in the governmental body who issue and calculate that CPI figure. So, for example, if you look at food prices, I'm sure everyone will agree that food prices are continuously on the rise since 2008. So technology, a DVD player or an HD television, that is on the decline in price. So if you're well off and you have a good job, then you don't really take care because the two more or less equal themselves out. But if you're on a minimum pay job and rising food prices or rising rents, which they do in Europe everywhere, they will really hurt you. So
So
this
this
is why we recommend to have these two sources of information coming in to get a more broader overview. And what I noticed in the mainstream media pretty much around everywhere in Europe, because I'm traveling a lot, is that they have maybe 5 to 8 messages a day and they repeat them from 9 in the morning to 8 in the evening. There is 8 different messages.
an
So
example of
let's
what
say
an example of one.
there was a massive pileup on some motorway outside of Paris, say, and the EU financial ministers agreed on a stimulus for Greece, for example. So that's 2 messages, and these 2 messages they get repeated from 9 o'clock in the morning till let's say 8 o'clock in the evening. The gold price compared to the other markets is tiny. So moving a market that is tiny compared to stock and bond markets up or down is very easy for the big players. And while we do not get current data on the OTC trades, which is the over-the-counter trade, of gold and silver, we do get an annual information from the Bank of International Settlement about these trades, and it is currently somewhat about 40 times an ounce of gold is traded that actually is backed by a real physical ounce. So if you have a leverage of 40 and you can trade those 40 paper ounces of gold, then you can easily move up and influence prices within a market that is not that super big compared to the overall stock and bond markets. The manipulation issue is in gold because it is always a mirror of the weakness or the strength of a currency is with us for quite some time. I mean, it was in the old days, like 2000 years back, when an empire went to war. Obviously, that is a cost expensive situation. So they had to get copper into the coins to dilute that value, right? Because then the coin doesn't have that same amount of gold, but it still looks at it, but it's just gold plated. And in the 1960s, they invented the gold pool, and then they invented the derivative trades, and that is all more or less well documented for the interested people that want to go, for example, to the Gold University on celticgold.eu. So we've addressed that quite in depth, or do a Google search for these manipulation situation. So yes, the market's being manipulated, but then on the other hand, the price that's being in the charts and it's been registered on the global exchanges, that is what we see. And if that is what we see, then we have to go with it. Jim Sinclair says, real is what we see in the charts, for example. Oh yes, of course there is real gold and silver in the marketplace, but that paper market is just 40 times bigger in trading. So for example, the inventory on the New York COMEX is 2% of the monthly gold that is being traded there.
Okay, so a direct question to the gold and silver that you're selling. That is real gold and silver.
Yes, of course, there is the physical bullion industry, and they actually sell the real physical gold and silver coins and bars for people. But that bullion industry is compared to the, in general, small gold market, even smaller because the gold that is minted for retail investment on an annual basis is making up about 25%. So this explains why we see these shortages. If really a fair amount of people want to move some of their assets into physical gold and silver. Well, in our view, there is only a couple of really valuable measures that people can do to protect their wealth. So the first thing is move a percentage of your investments into physical gold and silver coins and bars. Because if you can hold it, you own it. If you can't hold it, you don't own it. There's tons of providers out there that provide certificates. Some of them sell the gold that is still in the ground, that has to be digged up in order to become, real and to the surface and refined into a product. So we recommend to buy, but obviously we're the people who sell these things. So we recommend physical gold and silver, at least 5 to 10% of the portfolio that the investor has. And then obviously when once people dive into the subject and learn more about financial history, monetary policies, and where this is all headed, then usually people increase their percentage of gold and silver to maybe 10, 20, 30%. Before you have money available for investment, you should be debt free, because I call it the tidal waves. So the tide goes up and down, and now currently we have this massive wave of freshly created euros and dollars and pounds, at almost 0% interest rate. And at some point, this tide changes. And once it goes back and you sit there and you have debt, and the interest rate goes, let's say, to 7 or 8%, then you're really in trouble. Well, if you decide to buy physical gold coins, or silver coins or bullion, then you choose a bullion dealer, and there's many across Europe. There is maybe 30 to 40 very, very decent companies. So you choose one of them. Some of them offer lower prices than others. The product in general is interchangeable. So if you see, let's say, a Kruger run that is in mint condition from the current year 2015, then it doesn't really matter where you buy that coin from, because if it's a reputable company, so you can go with who I like best, who offers the best price, etc., etc. So, so that is something that is well worth a good research. And then some people, the people that invest like 100,000 or more, they may want to have it stored. So you need to find a bullion company that stores in a high security vault, where you can access your goods in storage, where you can sell them, move them, ship them. So you're completely flexible with your storage, and then obviously doesn't charge a lot. So some providers charge 1.52%, some charge a lot less.
Is that one point?
So
Is that a percentage of the sale price when you sell it, or is that a percentage of a monthly fee?
no, that is the annual fee of the high security storage. You simply buy it mostly online, because that's the most convenient way, and you can choose from a variety of different bullion dealers, and then you strike the best price, of course. So for example, if we ship gold, we'll have like a little sealed package with specific instructions, and we insure that package. So once the package is with a customer, we can tell that that shipment was authentic and genuine, and the customer sees it usually at first sight. And we're shipping thousands of those packages across Europe every year, and there was never one that was tampered with. So the first answer is the chance that something happens on the way is very, very minimal. Then you have it at home, and I recommend to people, you can go to our Gold University, and search for storage. And I think there's 4 or 5 different articles up to that address the home storage situation, and how people can sort of like hide it away in a hidden compartment, or move it somewhere outside of the side of, if any burglar comes and tries to rob it. So there is a couple of measures that people can go for and people can do. And obviously there's also the idea of moving it into a safety deposit box, with a private provider. I mean, there's different companies across Europe. There's in Dublin, there's one that's called Marion Walls. In London, there is a couple. There's Metro Walls, Silver Walls, and in Germany there is De Gossar, who offers these deposit boxes. So if you can just do an online research, you'll find plenty of information. The first thing is that you should only buy from a reputable bullion company. So not on eBay. And you should only buy the major known minted, circulated, and known coins and bars. So, for example, the Kruger and the Maple Leaf, the Vienna Philharmonic, the Australian Nugget, that is like the top coins that are minted and manufactured. And then we have the UBS, Valcambi, Herreys, Degussa, Umicore gold bars and Perth Mint gold bars that are circulated in Europe. So one should always go with these products. The bars in these days, they always come with a certificate, and they are single sealed in a plastic protective case. And the coins, they can be usually viewed at and compared to the product picture that is circulated in the internet on various sites. And usually you see it first sight. And we actually addressed that authenticity check of gold and silver coins again in the Gold University. The Gold University is like a body of information that is free, available to everyone, and you can go there to our website celticgold.eu and click Gold University and or perform a search to actually get the news articles. So there is the the test that you look at the coin at the minting of the coin. Then you do the ping test, the magnet test, and obviously you weigh and measure the coin. And if there would be any other metal inside of it, then that would mean the coin is either thicker or smaller, or it weighs more, significantly more or less. So that is usually the test, and that gets you to 90% accuracy. Gold confiscation in the last time in the 1930s in the US was only done because gold was still money. And confiscating gold was the only way to do QE at that time. So now in these days, because we're having these massive amounts of debt inside the system, gold has to be revalued to a minimum of 20,000 to 30,000 US dollars per ounce in order for the government to actually go for it. And this is what people really need to understand. The confiscation scare is always used to say like, oh, don't buy it because the government can take it away. But why would the government take it away if it is much easier to bail in maybe 10 trillion euros of bank deposits with a few mouse clicks? Well, we view gold and silver as the ultimate money because it can't be counterfeit that easily. You know, it's indestructible. It survives centuries on the ground of the sea without getting tarnished or destructed or anything. So the idea is that gold is for us because we know the financial history and the monetary history, that is gold the ultimate currency, the ultimate store of wealth. And Russia and China, they have a much better grasp of the history of money and especially of the Western monetary policies than the average investor that thinks about where to move 10, 20, 100, 200,000 euros or pounds to invest. And many people simply do not know about gold. So if you go to a bank or to your advisor and you say, oh, I thought about gold and silver investments, he or she most likely doesn't know anything about it. We have to see how the next phase of this gold and silver bull market that started in the year 2000 actually map out. So we have tons of problems in the global financial system that haven't been solved after 2008. The only thing they did was create money out of nowhere, and that obviously increased debt through the roof, and they only made that debt payable by getting the interest rate almost down to zero. So fair enough, we have to see that these gold bull markets, they usually last between 20 and 25 years. So at some point between let's say now to 2025, we have to watch the signs and they will be very, very clear. So for example, if we just complete that cycle, and that cycle, the end of that current bull market in gold and silver should take gold to $5,000 an ounce, and it should take silver to about $100 an ounce. So at the end of that bull market, we have to see how the situation looks. If it's just the end of the bull market, people want to cash in. And how they cash it in is they sell it back to the bullion company they bought it from. They sell it back to any bank. Obviously, we'll provide insured transportation and to make it easy and convenient for everyone. And then we'll move the money, that currency, whatever the currency is we use, we transfer that back into the account of the customer. If there's no account usable, people use gold and silver, like like 100 years back. You know, if everything is in place, if the electronic system is in place and everything works out nicely, it could be that we're all using some sort of cryptocurrency account then in 10 years' time. So we'll move that gold back, convert it into cryptocurrency. And that is the beauty about gold and silver. People can exchange it. It's a truly global standard, and people can exchange it into any currency that they want. You can buy a Kruger run today, and you can travel with it in any country of the world, and you can redeem it in local currency. We have the website that is called www.celticgold.eu, and we have the contact information on the left side of the website, so people can call us, they can email us, or they leave a note through the website, and we're happy to answer any query that one might have.